Are you masochistic? Do you want to face tank anything that comes your way and fulfill the warrior dream? Are you perhaps a little sadistic too, and wish to follow in the footsteps of Leroy Jenkins? Do you want to do your Shira brothers proud? Well, my friend, you come to the right place, as this guide is meant for you, as we'll be going over mercenaries. Hey, what is up guys, it's Emenalus, and welcome back to another video. Back when I made the Tips for Beginners video on Flyff Universe, I said at the end that if the video reached 500 likes, I would start making comprehensive class guides on each and every class the game has to offer, including a debriefing of the subclasses that you gain access to at level 60. Surely by now, the video has reached over 500 likes, so I feel like it's time I made justice to that promise. Now, a little disclaimer before we get started. I am aware that there exists plenty of guides for the game already, so there might be a lot of things you already know if you watched any of these. My approach in particular, however, will be more on the side of telling what you can do, but not as much about what you should do, as I like to leave room for people to make their own decisions over what they want out of their character. I find it more fun for everyone that way. In short, I provide the ideas, but you'll get to decide what suits your interests the best. But with all of that out of the way, let's put on our giraffe hats and get right into it. So, before we get any deeper into today's job, let's get the basic information out of the way. Mercenary is a job that, much like the Vagrant that he started with, relies on the usage of one-handed swords and axes, paired with a shield to bolster their defenses. The strength of this job lies in high defense and offense, but being in the melee range also exposes them to many dangers and are therefore vulnerable to things such as special giant or boss attacks and ranged monsters. Other than that, it's a really simple and effective class and something I'd consider to be a strong pick for a beginner. At level 60, mercenaries can specialize to either become blades, dual-wielding storms of steel that sacrifice some of their defensive capabilities for a considerable boost in damage, or knights, extremely tanky juggernauts who can take a heavy beating before being taken down and handle a pack of monsters quite easily. If you wish to know more about these classes, I'll be explaining them briefly towards the end of the video. Mercenaries have access to a wide array of different kinds of abilities. Their skill set can be roughly divided into active combat skills that can form deadly combos, and passive enhancements that bolster the power of a mercenary indefinitely. Some of the notable skills in the mercenary tree are Special Hit, a skill that allows you to do group damage starting from level 30, Shield Bash that can briefly stun an enemy, as well as the passive combat buffs that play a major role in both active skilling and auto-attacking. Notice that mercenaries have separate skills for both axes and swords, so choosing which weapon type you want to specialize early on is important. You won't have the points to max up both in a while. Oh, the pain of finding a great but incompatible weapon. I can feel the painful memories flowing into me. Mercenaries in general aren't reliant on using skills, and most players simply use auto-attacking as the primary source of damage, but there are still plenty of useful skills you might want to learn. Mind that you have a limited pool of skill points, and what you might want can heavily depend on how your character is built, so be sure to plan ahead what it is you want from your young aspiring mercenary. Talking about building your character, let's go over some of the primary attributes and what effects they have on a mercenary. Strength is your main source of damage. Each point will add a few points to your swing and increase your giraffeness by 1. Dexterity is a versatile stat that serves as a supporting factor to your damage output. While it doesn't directly add to your damage, it can help with causing it by providing useful stats such as attack speed, critical chance, and hit rate. It also increases the likelihood that you'll block or parry an attack, serving a defensive purpose. Stamina is a defensive stat that increases your HP, FP, and base defense, essentially making you tankier. Intelligence for a mercenary is completely useless. Unless you like inting, of course, I'm not stopping you from doing that. Go ahead, run it down mid. I know you want to. Jokes aside, the first 3 stats are the ones you want to focus on as a mercenary. However, how much emphasis you'll want to put to each of these stats depends a lot on what you want from your mercenary and what you're wearing. For example, there are armor sets and weapons that give you certain stat boosts, and you can gain additional stats through jewelry and upgrading your equipment. That's why suggesting a definitive build on Flyff is always hard, because the needs can vary a lot depending on how much you can invest on your equipment. So, to make things at least a little bit chewier for someone new to the game, I'll instead tell you what kind of stat values you're looking for and what to do once you reach these certain values. If you're intending on building a 1v1 mercenary, aka a mercenary that focuses on taking enemies down individually, you should mostly focus on getting your hit rate and attack speed up over anything else. Hitting hard won't do you much good if you're missing half your hits, and makes the gameplay also feel unsatisfying. I'd say that at least 40% hit rate would make them feel much more pleasant, but the minimum attack speed on the other hand is more up to the individual preference. For me, I usually like my attack speed to be at least 70%, but make what you want out of that. 40% hit rate might sound like a lot, but no worries, you can actually reach this amount of hit rate pretty easily. While Dexterity is a poor option for improving your hit rate, most of the early level armor sets give flat hit rate boost as a set effect, and if you opt in to get help from a support assist, either someone else or your own alt account, they might have learned the accuracy buff from level 30 onwards. This buff can give you 20% hit rate at the max level without including the possible in-scaling bonus. Then there's the possibility of upgrading your gear for additional bonuses, but that's for a later part in the game when you have enough money to fund the materials. As for attack speed, Dexterity is actually pretty good for scaling it, especially with its occasional bursts of 4% called speed breaks and if you want some of that additional crit chance. Some sets and weapons will also increase your attack speed, so keep your eyes open for those as well. As you might have noticed by now, the game offers a lot of opportunities to increase these stats as your level increases in the form of items, so you really have to keep your eyes out for those. No need for concern though, there's actually this really handy wiki website called flyffipedia.com where you can find a big roster of items that you can filter to find exactly what you're looking for. Use it to discover what weapons and sets become available to you, and discover which ones suit your needs. It also contains a lot of other cool information, including the bonuses you get from upgrading your gear, and dungeons that you can run with your friends. Definitely check it out if you want to stay on top of things in the game. When you feel like you've got the hang of these two stats, or you feel like it'll be sorted at a certain level, you can focus your attention on your damage and survivability. In most cases, you can just focus your points of strength to increase your damage, but in case you start feeling like you'll turn into dust from a mere touch, you can opt in to add Dexterity to increase your block and parry rates, or Stamina to increase your durability as needed. Stamina might also come in handy if you intend on running harder content with your characters such as dungeons and giant hunting, so you won't get one-shots. Assists also have some defense and support buffs that might be enough life insurance for you, but that also depends on whether you want to be able to stand on your own, or rely on outside help. In terms of skills, as a 1v1 mercenary, you're better off mostly relying on your auto attacks, so put emphasis on learning some of those passive combat buffs I mentioned earlier. Choose whether you want to start off with axes or swords, and stick to those and the buffs dedicated to that weapon type. Empower Weapon skill requires you to apply elements to your weapon in order to be used, so you can keep the skill on the minimum required level until you start applying elements on your weapons. If you also prefer to have some utility, you can learn Shield Bash for stuns and Sneaker for roots, but that's totally up to you. Either way, hope this helped in case you were thinking of making a 1v1 mercenary. Moving on to the other alternative. If you're intending on making an AoE mercenary, aka a mercenary that focuses on dealing group damage to a pack of monsters, or perhaps you got discouraged by the complexity of making a good 1v1 character, all that really matters is that you can take on a few hits. Dealing group damage relies entirely on the skill called Special Hit that you can learn starting from level 30, and skills don't actually rely on hit rate as they can't miss. So, as long as you can deal with a few mobs hitting you at the same time, you're good to go. AoE Mercenary mostly relies on building stamina in order to increase your HP and defense. The additional FP from building stamina will also come in handy as the skill uses FP, allowing you to cast the skill a few times before your FP reserves are exhausted. Also learn that Protection skill will increase your defenses based on its level, making it an important skill to max out as soon as you're done with special hits. After that, you can start focusing on learning some of those passive weapon buffs with the spare points you gather as you level up. And if you feel like you've become tanky enough, you can start building some strength in order to amplify your damage. Teach them not to mess with the giraffe! Since AoE doesn't necessarily need any special gear or stats to be effective, playing as an AoE mercenary is also quite cost effective. Of course, better gear can improve your performance significantly, but it's not as important as it is on a 1v1 build. AoE gear also tends to be quite cheap in comparison. I'll remind here as well that if you want to discover what kind of gear awaits you in the future levels, be sure to check out flyffipedia.com for its item catalog and some other database information that you might be interested in. Playing as an AoE also requires more preparation and caution than a 1v1 does. You will need to invest money on stronger food and FP potions. You might also want to buy some pills, high cooldown food items that you can use to save yourself in a pinch. In order to avoid wasting too many pills and risking constantly dying, you also have to control the amount of monsters you pull and not overdo it. This is a matter of practice that comes through trial and error, so don't be discouraged if you keep dying. Just take it easier if you find yourself struggling. AoE is also more codependent later on, as the amount of healing you can get from food hits a wall and you'll need additional sources of healing. This usually means employing a support player to heal you while you're tanking. This is an issue that becomes more apparent after your second job though, so you'll have plenty of time to make friends who can cover for you. Now that I'm done going over the two main builds you can choose as a mercenary and 5 pages of script, I'm gonna briefly go through the jobs that you can advance into once you reach level 60. Mind you that your stat points will reset as you change jobs, so it doesn't really matter how you play this far if you have a change of hearts in terms of playstyle. Blade is a more offense-oriented job that you can choose on your second job change. As you become a Blade, you have the ability to drop the protection that has occupied your left hand this entire time and start wielding two weapons. The weapon equipped in your offhand will deal significantly increased damage and increase your style points. Blades can learn a wide array of single target skills and some AoE, along with the buff that you can use to enhance your auto attacks temporarily. Let the wild beast inside you take over. Blades are best known to be the go-to 1v1 class upon job change, and their design shows it, but they do also display capability to specialize in AoE. Blade has everything it needs to make a decent AoE build and also be good at it. Just make sure that the stat build and itemization corresponds to making either build viable. Building a Blade for 1v1 is quite similar to how the Mercenary works, as a lot of emphasis goes into the combined power of hit rate, attack speed, and strength. However, when it comes to survivability, Blades are known to lose effect on building stamina and scaling much better off of dexterity. So if you want to focus on making an AoE Blade or making your 1v1 Blade more durable, you should consider building some dexterity too. On a side note, I also want to point out how elements behave with Blades dual wielding. Instead of each weapon behaving individually based on their own element, the game actually registers the element on your main hand weapon to be the element you're using on both hands. So if you're wielding a weapon with elemental weakness on your offhand, you won't be getting as much damage boost as you would from wielding it on your main hand. I think this has to do with the fact that the game wasn't designed for holding a weapon in the shield slot and doesn't calculate the weapon element in it. I'll be making a more detailed video about elements later. Also, I want to extend a huge thanks to Runeblade for helping me out with the Blade portion. You're a real one, dude. Knight, on the other hand, is a more defensive job that you can choose upon second job change. When you become a Knight, you'll be able to wield giant two-handed axes and swords, which are needed for most of the Knight's new abilities. Knights can learn additional buffs that offer flexibility for tanking, as well as offensive to some extent, and some additional offensive skills for both 1v1 and AoE. Knights, in contrast to Blades, are often recognized to be the advanced AoE path for mercenaries, but they can build themselves to specialize in 1v1 as well. In terms of weaponry, there's a pretty clear distinction between tanky axes and deadly swords, with some exceptions to the pattern. Flyff Universe also introduced a lot more viability to a sword and shield build, with some additional skills, basically playing like a mercenary beyond level 60. Knights scale extremely well on stamina, making them incredible tanks, especially when paired with well upgraded gear. This also means that they don't need much to stay alive when built for a 1v1, but they also don't scale on strength as well as Blades do. You can consider Knights to turn into more robust warriors when built for 1v1, but not exactly the best in dealing damage. Whether that's a good or a bad thing is up to you. Well, that just about concludes everything that I think I can explain about mercenaries. That was a lot of information to take in, but I hope that at the very least you learned something new about them today. And giraffes. Let me know in the comments below which job you would like me to go over next, as making this can take a while, so rather go by your wishes on which videos come out first. If you were left with any more questions about the job or about the game in general, feel free to leave a comment, or alternatively come join me and my community in my Discord server for easier communication. I'll leave the link for the server down below if you're interested. I'm gonna start working on a video going over the many forms of upgrading that are available to you in Flyff Universe, and I hope to have that released in the next couple weeks. If you wish to see that as well, make sure to stay tuned for when my new video comes out. Thank you so much for watching, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I wish you a terrific day and experience in Flyff Universe. But until next time, it's bye bye for now. Cheers.